Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Maya Hollingshed, and I am the branch manager at the historic John L. Dart Library in downtown Charleston. Welcome to the R. Keith Summey Library here in North Charleston. Today I am so happy to welcome ReShonda Tate, who will be talking about her new book, The Queen of Sugar Hill. As the national best-selling author of more than 50 books, ReShonda Tate has the credentials and the passion to bring stories to life. ReShonda writes both adult and teen fiction, as well as nonfiction. Her sophomore novel, Let the Church Say Amen, was made into a film directed by Regina King and produced by T.G. Jakes and Queen Latifah. A highly sought-after motivational speaker and award-winning poet, ReShonda is the recipient of the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literature for her book, Say Amen Again, and was also nominated for her books, Mama's Boy and The Secret She Kept. She received many distinguished awards and honors for her journalism, fiction, and poetry writing skills. With her first historical novel, The Queen of Sugar Hill, ReShonda presents a portrait of Hattie McDaniel, the first African-American woman to win an Academy Award, and the trials and tribulations she faced after winning an Oscar. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for ReShonda Tate.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much for coming out tonight and inviting me to your wonderful town. I've been all over the country, and this is my first time in Charleston, so I'm excited to be here. I've already checked out your TJ Maxx. I'm out promoting The Queen of Sugar Hill. I am so excited about this book. I initially did not like Hattie McDaniel. My grandmother loved Gone with the Wind. And I remember watching it with her, and she just loved it, and I didn't. And so she asked why I did not like it, and I told her it was because Hattie McDaniel, I didn't like the way she was acting. I didn't like the fact that she was a maid, and she was so over the top. And my grandmother said, but she's playing a maid, and I am a maid. So why are you looking at her with such disdain? Then she added, besides, it's 1939. What did you expect her to play, Scarlett O'Hara? And it was then that I thought, my grandmother was onto something. I was looking at Hattie McDaniel through a 21st century lens. And when I took that lens off, I was able to get a better appreciation for who she was. And so I really fell in love with her and wanted to tell her story. Over the years, I got sidetracked with fiction. I'm a journalist by trade. But after 53 books, I felt like I wanted to do something different, and Hattie kept talking to me. So I decided to tell her story. And as I set out to research her story, I was dumbfounded at the amount of information on the internet that was incorrect. Wow. A lot of people don't know that. They think I Google, I go to Wikipedia, and I get all of the information. And probably 50% of the stuff I found online was wrong. And so I went digging, and I did extensive research, and I researched Hattie for 3 years.
Wow.
My girlfriend was finally like, can you stop researching and write the book? And so I wrote the book. I was adamant about telling her story. My agent sent the query letter and a couple of chapters out, and within 24 hours, we had like 5 publishers ready to bid on it. And so it went to auction, and I ended up going with HarperCollins, William Morrow. Mm-hmm. And in my entire career, this is the first time I've had publishers fighting over a book. And we're in an interview, they each want an interview to convince me why I should go with them. And I'm sitting, my girlfriend is like, you act like you hadn't been nowhere, because I'm sitting there like, are they trying to convince me? But I was excited to have a choice, and then I landed with William Morrow. And so here I am with The Queen of Sugar Hill.
Okay. That is great. Could you do a quick reading for us and delve into it for those who haven't had a chance to read the book yet?
So I read from this excerpt, and you feel free to take some if you want to take them and give them to friends, because this is just the NAACP waged an all-out war against Hattie McDaniel. That was one of the things that I was stunned to find. They did not like her at all. They were well-meaning, but they wanted better representation on film. And they did it at the expense of actors like Hattie McDaniel. So this quick scene that I'm going to read is from the NAACP National Convention in Los Angeles in July of 1942. The who's who of colored Hollywood was at this event. I didn't usually feel intimidated when I walked into a room, but standing there in the foyer of the shrine, between the intricate columns and red velvet curtains lining the wall, looking at what amounted to Negro royalty, gave me an apprehension I seldom had. I spotted Mary McLeod Bethune deep in conversation with John H. Johnson, the publisher of the Negro Digest. Los Angeles Mayor Fletcher Bowron was standing with the guest speaker, Wendell Willkie, and A. Philip Randolph, who was receiving the Spingarn Award for his accomplishments in the field of labor with the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. I had no idea this many people would be here, I whispered to my husband James. The auditorium seated nearly 7,000 people, and it looked like every seat was taken. Yes, it's an impressive turnout. I understand it's NAACP delegates from all over the country as well as guests. Now, aren't you glad you came? I had to admit that James was right and that I needed to put aside my disdain and attend this conference. Still, all I could manage was an I suppose. When I checked us in, they said we had reserved seating in the front row, James said, brushing the collar of his muted gray suit as if he wanted to ensure we were seen as we maneuvered the narrow aisle toward the front. The program began with a hearty song by the Second Baptist Church. After a few acknowledgments and introductions, NAACP Executive Secretary Walter White took the podium. Thank you to everyone gathered here today, he began. I am happy to wrap up our conference, and I hope you go back to your respective cities fully energized and charged to do the work of the NAACP. I also wanted to take a moment to talk about our mission. One of the things we're fighting is the deplorable state of race relations worldwide, and no greater area is that being manifested than in Hollywood, Mr. White said to rambunctious applause. He paused. I have worked tirelessly to urge filmmakers to make a complete break from the tradition of showing Negroes as menial characters who are nothing more than grinning Uncle Toms. We are sending a direct message to colored Hollywood veterans regarding the responsibilities in the struggle. I began shifting in my seat as all feelings of euphoria dissipated. I knew this was veering into a lane to attack actors like me, and in that moment I silently cursed my husband for insisting that I come. Mr. White continued, we are asking Negro actors to play their roles with sincerity and dignity instead of mugging and playing the clown for the camera. I wasn't the only one who thought Walter White was talking about me. I could feel the hot glare of attendees as he spoke. Many of you have been reading the news about my discussions with the studio heads about our portrayal in cinema, he continued. I have been negotiating directly with the studios, and I am happy to report that my nearly 3 years of meeting have paid off. He paused as more applause filled the room. And to show you that these producers are listening to our concerns, I have some wonderful news to share with you, he continued. I would like to invite an amazing actress to the stage. Walter paused and motioned toward where I was sitting in the front row. Oh my, I definitely hadn't expected him to acknowledge me. I guess that was why I'd been extended a personal invitation. I moved my bag to the side, preparing to stand. Please help me welcome Hollywood newcomer Lena Horne, Mr. White said. My face was flushed with embarrassment as I sank back in my seat. Lena headed up to the stage, her yellow satin dress framing her body like she was a goddess. She hugged Mr. White on stage. He stepped from behind the podium, took her hand, lifted it, and twirled her around like they were in the middle of a ballroom dance. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you the perfect image of the new cinematic Negro. She's articulate, sophisticated, thin, light-skinned, and extraordinarily beautiful. The room erupted in ovation again, and I felt physically ill. Miss Horne got her start at Harlem's Cotton Club, and she is well known among the Negro leadership. I couldn't believe the way he was prancing her around, or the way the crowd seemed to be eating it all up. This makes her the perfect person to establish a different kind of image for Negro women, Mr. White continued. He glared at me as he leaned closer to the microphone. It is time that we get rid of the grinning darky stereotype, the swiveled-eyed cretins who shuggle, jig, and drop consonants throughout the film. He paused and glared down at me in the front row. Hattie McDaniel's mammy is no more. That's an excerpt from The Queen of Sugar Hill. And the thank you very much. The crazy part is that happened.
Wow.
And so that, it was things like that I discovered throughout the research process. And Hattie had to sit through there with all of these thousands of people in this auditorium and hold her head held high.
Wow. Yeah. We'll get more into Hattie's story and all those things that happened a little bit as I go along to my questions. But my first question is, you have traditionally written fiction, Christian fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, teen, YA books. You've written it all. Why did you decide to go into historical fiction?
Yeah, after 53 books, I was tired. I wanted to do something different. And I actually was going to retire. I'm a screenwriter, and so I was going to shift to screenwriting. And Hattie was like, no, ma'am, you need to tell my story. My mother says I need to stop telling people that because I sound crazy. But she talked to me and said, it's time for you to tell my story.
Okay, great. And I'm like, I know you also got some encouragement from one of your BFFs. Yeah. And my Sarah, Victoria to Christopher Murray, who has actually forged her own path in historical fiction with Marie Benedict with The Personal Librarian and The First Ladies.
Yes. One of the things, she was actually with me. We went to do research in Los Angeles, and we went to Hattie's house. It's abandoned now, but I stood outside. I spent almost 2 hours at her house just taking it all in, and I know this sounds crazy, but I felt her spirit like tell my story. And so I left there energized and ready to tell her story. Okay,
great. So you said Hattie kept talking to you throughout the years, and I guess that's probably also why that many of us know that she was the first Black actress to win the Oscar. And I believe also the first Black person, period.
Yes, first Black person, period. And then another Black woman did not win an Oscar until 1991. She won in 1940. The next woman that won was in 1991. Whoopi Goldberg won for Ghost.
And there's only been a few more since. We know Halle is still the only one who has won the Best Actress Oscar.
Yes, and there's only 9. In 84 years, only 9 Black women have won.
Yeah, and maybe, hopefully, the way things are going, there may be a 10.
Maybe 10 this year, hopefully.
Maybe. Yeah, because there are 2 Black women who are up for the Oscars for Best Supporting Actress this year. So, and it looks like it's the one from
Danielle Brooks from The Color Purple and Divine Joy Randolph from The Whole World.
The one for The Whole World, because I think she's pretty much has swept the.
Yes.
Yeah, so, yeah.
And that's a whole other angle. People will ask me, what do I think Hattie would think of the progress we made? Mm-hmm. I think it would be bittersweet. She really wanted to open doors, but here we are, 84 years later, and Sophia, Danielle Brooks, was a domestic.
Yes.
As was Danielle, Divine Joy Randolph, a domestic. And so I can't wait till we get to the point where we can have a scientist win or someone with, other than domestic help.
Right. Yeah, because like Octavia Spencer won for being a domestic. What happened at that NAACP dinner where, Lena Horne was presented on a silver platter? Mm-hmm. So how were you able to address that? And you said this is something. Some of those events really did happen.
Yeah, so that was part of one of the biggest challenges Hattie had. White people didn't like her because they felt Mammy was too sassy. Black people didn't like her because they felt it was a demeaning stereotype. And so she really did struggle to find her place in this world. She just wanted to act. And she used to always say, it was so unfair because Lucille Ball was a silly comedian at the time. And Lucille could act crazy and be silly, and it was fine. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't an indictment on the whole race. But when Hattie did it, she said it's an indictment on the whole race. I'm putting down my people. And her thing was, what would you have me to do? I would love to be Wonder Woman. Where do I go sign up for this role?
Yeah.
But the NAACP, the black people that protested her, were like, do something else. And so that's where her infamous phrase came from. I'd rather play a maid for $700 than be a maid for $7.
Yeah. And then it was, it wasn't like, there were at that time, no other roles for African American actors besides being servants.
Servants and slaves. And then the quote unquote pretty black actors like Dorothy Dandridge and Lena Horne were reduced to prostitutes and sexual roles. So they were frustrated as well, but they weren't letting black people, period, just have regular roles.
Yeah. And now you see more, like I said, now there are more people behind the camera. You see, Tyler Perry has his own production studio, and, more African Americans now are in those front-facing roles. And I want to talk about Hattie's relationship, on and off relationship with the media, because there were some journalists, she would talk to, and then they turn things around, and then she'll be hated, and then she'll let them back in for a little while, and obviously the letters, they happened.
Yes. So imagine you just want to act, and that was Hattie's dilemma. She just wanted to do her job, and she would always take the high road, but every now and then you do a Monique and you snap. And so Hattie would every now and then snap. And she would sit down and write these scathing letters that only served to get her in more trouble. And so she had a lot of animosity that she harbored because of the way she was treated. And so sometimes her friends had to rein her in, because they're like, okay, Hattie, do not send that letter. And then Hattie would sneak around the corner and send a letter. and it's printed in the paper in full, and it would only make things worse. And so she but you have to understand, if you're hated every day when you're trying to just do your job, at some point you want to say something back.
Yes. When they go low, sometimes we,
you want to get in the gutter with them.
She, probably didn't take Michelle's advice. Michelle Obama wasn't born then, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, her relationship with her friends in Hollywood, both black and white, she was friends with Clark Gable, she was friends with Betty Davis, but then she had those ride or die black women who supported her through thick and thin. Can we talk about the differences in the relationships? And we also saw she was very helpful to her friends and neighbors.
Yeah. So a lot of people didn't realize how much of a support system she had. They were ride or die before we knew what ride or die was. She was good friends with Louise Beavers, who was in Imitation of Life, and Lillian Randolph, who was in It's a Wonderful Life. And Lillian was also the voice of Mammy Two Shoes on Tom and Jerry. So she was the first black woman to have a cartoon. But the thing is that they all looked alike. And Ruby Dandridge, Dorothy Dandridge's mother. So they all were, they were what they called typecast at the time. They were heavy-set black women, and they all went for the same roles because that's all they were looking for. But they still bonded over the disdain that they got. So they really did uplift each other. Her friendships with the white community was with Clark Gable, and like you said, Betty Davis. But Clark Gable was one of her best friends. And he was ready, that Clark was ride or die. Clark was ready to throw it all. If they wouldn't invite Hattie somewhere, then he was like, I'm not going either. And she's like, you're the king of Hollywood. You got to go. But he was like, we're not going. And anybody that gave her a hard time, he was ready to step up to the plate. And people will always ask, well, why did he have such an affinity for Hattie? And I think it's just because that's the type of person that he was. And there was a rumor about Clark Gable being black. And people asked me, did I research that? I did. And I debated and had long discussions on whether I include that. But since I didn't want to be on the list of banned books, I was like, I can't prove that Clark Gable is black, so we're going to leave that alone. And even in the filming of Gone with the Wind, he got the bathrooms integrated. So I include all of that in the book. And I do have a student raise his hand and ask, well, I heard Clark Gable was black, and that's where I left it. Baby, because the way those Gone with the Wind fan people. So yeah, but he really was a good-hearted individual.
Yeah, and then I know he was like, there's a scene where Hattie had to lift him up after.
Yes, his wife died. Carol Lombard died in a plane crash.
Yeah, and he was like in the bed, and he was like, "You got to get up," and then he eventually returns the favor.
Yes, they were equally good friends to one another. So it wasn't that he just put everything on the line for her. She was just as good a friend to him.
Okay, so we also wanted to mention like helping her friends and neighbors. One of her notable contributions was to fight racist housing policies in LA because the white neighbors did not want her in Sugar Hill. And they didn't want her and her black neighbors, so they fought back for racist housing policies, and they won.
That was one of the things that I was stunned at the most. I'm like, how do we not know this? So Hattie moved into the West Adams district, which was also called Sugar Hill, and she bought her house $10,000 above asking cost. She was excited about it. And her neighbors were like, oh no, there is a law called restrictive covenants, which means that you cannot sell your house to anyone who is not of European descent. And so they sued her and the other black people in the neighborhood to get them out of that neighborhood. They wanted to kick her out of the house. And Hattie led the class action suit that went to court. And it was because of her, they won that lawsuit. And that didn't happen in the 1940s. And that lawsuit was the catalyst for a Supreme Court lawsuit that struck down restrictive covenants. So people don't even realize we can live wherever we want because restrictive covenants was struck down thanks to Hattie McDaniel.
Yeah, so that was one thing I found like really, really fascinating that you integrated in the story was that, this restrictive covenant and, how she was able to get it struck down and that it got lost in history. And now this unsung history now of what she was able to do besides winning that Oscar, because we know her overplaying Mammy and winning the Oscar, but she was much more than that.
Absolutely. She would always say she just wanted people to realize she was more than Mammy.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to get into Hattie's love life. My Lord.
That's an understatement.
My Lord.
Anybody that hadn't read it, the deep breaths are necessary.
Yeah, my girl was walking the dog.
Yeah. She had no trouble getting one.
At all.
Keep it up. How did you want to explore that?
So this part of the research, it was almost like, how you find out your grandmother was getting it on, and that was like, you don't want to know all of that. That's how I was like, are you serious, Hattie? And then I was going, it's another one and another. I felt like I needed a flow chart to keep up with all Hattie's men. But so I took some creative liberties when it came to one of the young men she was seeing, because it was so many. And I was like, the reader is just going to get lost. So I did a composite and combined them all into one man, because there were a whole lot. She loved love. She was proud of her body, she loved sex, and she did it all. And so she had 4 husbands. And when those didn't work out, she went and got us some young men. She was a cougar before we knew what a cougar was. And, she really did just want love, but she had trouble with finding love. She had trouble with men. The last husband just took her money, drove her crazy. Yeah. And he was the catalyst for her involvement with Tallulah Bankhead. And I wrestled with that when I discovered that Tallulah Bankhead was a white actress of the time, and I wrestled with how much of that I wanted to dive into, but it's part of her story. And Tallulah introduced Hattie to the sewing circle, And the Sewing Circle is a group of women in Los Angeles. They were married to prominent movie producers, people in the industry, with what they called lavender marriages. And the Sewing Circle were a group of women that would meet up, every other weekend to not sew. I'm gonna just say that they would not sew. And this is very well known. There have been many books written on the Sewing Circle. And so, in my research with this, I don't know if Hattie went that way because of all the bad luck with the men, or if she just was like so many people during that time and simply curious. But I ultimately decided to include some of it just because it is her story.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And there were two of the husbands featured in this book, husband number 3 and husband number 4. And we know husband number 4 was the one who took the money and ran.
Yeah. The stuff that husband number 4 did was just ridiculous.
Trifling.
And I was able to get that information. You get a lot of information and research through letters. Mm. So she was writing letters to her friends, about the things that were happening. And so that's where I get the information for the story.
And then husband number 3, James, he stuck around a little bit. And
yeah, I think James really did love her, but he got caught up in she's one of the biggest actresses of her time. So I think he got caught up in all of that.
Okay. All right. So another thing that was featured was about Hattie's health. And we know medicine is not as advanced as it now, but then on the flip side, we knew health disparities were prevalent then, and we know health disparities are prevalent now. What do you think that her health was probably a product of the times, health disparities, or both?
Oh, absolutely, because she had breast cancer. Most people know she died from breast cancer, but they believe it sat in her for the longest. She was tired all the time, and we just didn't go to work. And she was very career driven, so she just would work right through it. And then if her health failed, she'd go get some rest. So the breast cancer lay dormant in her for a long time. She didn't listen to her body, even when it came to resting. Mm-hmm. And so I definitely think that. And then Hattie McDaniel desperately wanted children. So there is an issue with her pregnancy in the book, and that she definitely didn't, the doctors didn't take her serious. And that's something we still see to this day.
Yes, because I was like, wait, what? It was one thing, but it turned out it was totally something else. So yes. So we know that Hattie's situation, that she passed away destitute. And it was only about not long after she won. Mm-hmm. She could have been, lost to the history books, but we've still kept her memory alive. So what do you hope readers take away from the book?
I hope people will take off their 21st century lens and remember her for the legend that she was. Number one. Number two, when we look at her in the past, there was this big thing in 2020 to cancel Gone with the Wind and cancel Mammy. And it's because we were like me when I was a little girl, looking at the maid role with disdain, when many of our ancestors made us who we are today through their own domestic roles. Mm-hmm. So I choose to take off my 21st century lens when I look at her. And I also choose to look at the positive, because one of the things that people seem to have lost is because she was a domestic, we completely wrote her off. Mm-hmm. But in Gone with the Wind, she ran that whole plantation, as many black women did back in the day. So she was the one that kept it all together. She was the one that raised the children. And so I really do want people to look at her in a different light, mm-hmm. and appreciate her for the legend that she was. She wanted to be a credit to her race, and I hope that people will look at her and say she was indeed that.
Another question I just came up with the top of my head: are there any actresses you would like to give this book to, and maybe hope we option it for a movie or limited series?
No, I hadn't even thought about that. Yes. So it was the book was on the Today Show, and the anchor Craig Melvin, when they were talking about it, he was like, "Oh, that's gonna be a movie." I'm in my living room screaming, "From your lips to God's ears, Craig." But yes, I would absolutely love. And before Danielle was even nominated for an Academy Award, that's who I saw playing Hattie. I have saw Danielle Brooks since I started writing it. But I also know from having done that process before is that a good actress can make the role her own. Mm-hmm. So we do have several very prominent Hollywood people that requested the manuscript and looking at it. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed and praying that it will be made into a movie. We're claiming it, right?
We claiming it because Columbia's own Craig Melvin has already claimed it too.
Yes.
So this is the moment where we'll take some questions from the audience. Do y'all have it okay? Or y'all been waiting in that bag.
My question is, now that you started this with Hattie McDaniel, are you going to continue this by going in the same series with other actors? Because you mentioned Lena Horne, because that to me fascinates me. They put her up there as this on the pedestal as what they want the actresses to be, but there's another story side of her too. So I wonder if you plan to just not.
Yeah, I'm in the historical fiction category for now. I absolutely love it. And I am, what I'm loving is discovering the unsung heroes. The one I'm working on now, my next book will be on Hazel Scott.
Ooh.
And Hazel, to me, I didn't know Hazel prior to this, and I'm just stunned at a lot of people don't know who she was. And when I went back and started researching Hazel was the biggest jazz singer of our time in the past. Bigger than Billie Holiday, bigger than Sarah Vaughan. She was Adam Clayton Powell Jr.'s wife. And she was the richest woman of her time, the richest entertainer, first black woman to have her own TV show. And she was all but erased from history because she was very vocal in her civil rights, in her fight for civil rights. So they deemed her a communist, and she's all but been erased from history. And her story is fascinating. And so that's my next book, the Incomparable Mrs. Powell.
Okay. So will that be out, I guess, this time next year? Or?
No, so they do 2 years because of the research involved with historical fiction. So it'll be out in 2026.
Gotcha. I heard at my branch we had Vanessa Miller a week ago this past Friday, and she has also gotten hooked into historical fiction because she's working on one with an American Queen, and then she was talking about she's working one in Tulsa.
The Black Wall Street, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is an amazing category. So I'm a journalist by trade. And for me, this is the best of both worlds because I'm able to lay the foundation through my research with facts and then come in and use my novelist side and fill in the blanks with the fiction.
Mm-hmm. And I know, like I said, with your friend Victoria, getting the ball rolling, and now I'm seeing a lot more Black historical fiction and a lot more African American stories that are being told fiction-wise, but also being a part of history as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I just bought, it's by Denny Bryce.
Denny S. Bryce.
Yes.
She's amazing.
Yes, because I saw her at a festival in Savannah a couple of days ago, and her books are like Wild Woman in the Blues. So
excellent book.
Yes. So,
in the back. There was
young lady in the back of the white.
Hi. You're an AKA, correct?
Yes.
In your research, in the book, I should say, did you put anything about Hattie McDaniel being an SG?
If I had not, they would burn my book and put it up. So it's all up and throughout the book. We definitely give her credit because she was a proud member of Sigma Gamma Rho sorority. Okay. So yes, and it's funny because a lot of the SG Rhos were worried that I would leave that out. First of all, I'm not trying to, the SG Rhos would have me all over, like, don't buy that book.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, because it was a huge part of who she was and she was very proud of it, yes, it's mentioned multiple times.
Yes. Yeah, so for the camera. The question was her sorority of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated mentioned? And yes, it was mentioned several times. And there's even a scene where she meets all of the presidents of the sororities. ReShonda got to put that in there.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Oh, hold on. Julian's grabbing the mic.
I was just gonna ask if you could just give a brief biographical of where she was born, a little bit of that. I can't wait to go to Google because it seems like I might find false information. So if you could just-
Yes, even down to when she was born, a lot of times on Google says 1895. She was actually born in 1893. And she was born in Wichita. Her family moved to Denver because they heard a rumor that life was better for blacks in Denver. And they got to Denver and found out somebody lied. But they still were there, and they grew up very poor. Her parents were former slaves who met in the Confederacy. They were fighting in the Confederacy, and they met, and they really just wanted to give their kids a better life. Hattie was the baby of 13 kids. All the kids did not live. They, back in the day, several children would pass on. But Hattie was from an entertaining family. Her mother was a singer, but her mother only knew domestic life. So her mother didn't want them singing and acting. She used to pay Hattie give her a dime just to get her to stop singing, because she'd be singing around the house. But they were entertainers. Her and her sister started a vaudeville act called the McDaniel Sisters, and they used to tour. Hattie got her first start in performing at a carnival when she was 6 years old. Her brother Otis fancied himself a producer, and he would have all his siblings come and perform. And so that's where she really had the entertainment bug. But what a lot of people also don't know, they think that her career really started with Gone with the Wind and acting. She was the first black woman to ever have her blues song played on the radio. So she had an extensive blues career before she even went to Hollywood.
And also her, she had family. She wasn't the only one that was in Hollywood. Family member that was in Hollywood. Even I had tagged you in a post. I was like, oh, they're talking about Hattie and her other siblings.
Yeah, her brother Sam McDaniel he was in the Three Stooges. He was a very popular actor, and her sister Etta McDaniel. They were already in Los Angeles. And Hattie was working in Wisconsin. She had gone there because they were performing, and then it shut down. Their performance shut down. So she stayed there, and she worked for a club in the bathroom as a bathroom attendant. And before the term "Stay Ready so you don't have to get ready," that was Hattie McDaniel. So she wanted to perform, but she was a black maid, so all she could do was be a bathroom attendant until one night a bunch of soldiers came in right before closing time. Everybody else was gone, and they wanted to be entertained. And it was a bunch of them, and they were rowdy, they were ready to spend money. So the owner told Hattie, okay, go on stage, because she was like, I got this. He's like, you're the bathroom attendant. She's like, but I got this. And she went on stage and never left. She turned that club out. They loved it, and it just started getting packed because word was spreading. And so that's how her career took off again.
He's coming with the mic.
So I'm fascinated. The excerpt that you read had Mary McLeod Bethune mentioned. And so interesting, because I followed you and Victoria for about a decade on Facebook. Love your friendship, love the books. I've read both of your books. But I'm curious about the cross between the NAACP and Mary McLeod Bethune and Hattie, and whether, and it's fascinating since you guys are such best friends, and your characters first, they actually met and passed each other in
Right.
life. So I'm just curious if there's more to that, or if the two of you talked about the irony of that. I'm just
We
curious.
talked about it after the fact. We didn't realize it until she's reading through my book. But what's fascinating is Walter White, because in her book, Walter White is a hero.
Yes.
Walter White, everybody loves Walter White. So when she read my book, she was like, Walter White is low down. And so it was such a difference, a contrast. So that was interesting to be able to do that. And we're so deep in writing that we don't know it as we're writing it. And then we read each other's books. And she was dumbfounded because he's completely opposite of who he was to her.
That's a fascinating perspective.
Thank you.
All right. And speaking of Mary McLeod Bethune, I'm from her birthplace, Maysville, South Carolina.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, I have a question. So, what made you decide to do historical fiction versus biography? Did the biography require more research that maybe wasn't there? Or?
Because I still want to make some stuff up. So one of the things that I love, I'm a storyteller, and I didn't want to regurgitate history. I wanted to tell her story. So really what I did, the foundation of everything that I did in this book is true. And the fiction comes in, for example, after the Academy Awards, the entire cast of Gone with the Wind went to a club. And everybody, they're excited, they're ready to party, and they don't allow Hattie McDaniel to come in. And that's a fact. We know that she was denied entry into this club. We don't know what the bouncer said to her. So that's where the fiction comes in. And I enjoy that part as well as much as the research. So now I get to say, all we know in history is she was denied it. So now I get to paint that picture. So that's what I really love about historical fiction.
Okay. Oh, there's the lady in the hat. Yeah.
I'm here, real quick.
One more question. With the NAACP situation, in your research, did Lena Horne and Hattie McDaniel ever talk after that situation happened?
Yes, so Lena did not know she was about to be used in that manner. And she was really, really upset about it because she really respected Hattie McDaniel. And in the book, this scene prior to her going on stage, she had met Hattie. She'd gone up to her and told her, I'm such a fan. And so she didn't like being used. And Hattie talked to her about it afterwards and told her, I understand that wasn't about you. She really appreciated that. Now, a few weeks later, Hattie did take the stage, and she was trying to make a speech, and she called Lena Horne the N-word. And it was it hurt her a lot. She doesn't know why she did it, if it was a Freudian slip, what made it come out, but she caught extensive backlash for that.
You've been in it in a long time. So Belinda and I'm going to go back to the National Book Club Conference in 2011 when it was in downtown Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And I remember then there was talk about the industry changing. And I remember there was a particular author who was like, don't buy the books, or buy the books yourself, don't share it with your friends, blah, blah, blah. They didn't say nothing about the library. Or stop buying from the authors that were selling it on Kindle for $1.99.
Yeah.
And it's changed even a lot since that almost decade and a half.
Yeah, so you really have to educate people, because I'll have people come up to me, not so much anymore because I do educate people on this, but they'll say, I love you, you're one of my favorite authors, I bought your book and I passed it to 32 of my friends, and I'm looking like I made $1. And then that's what the publisher is seeing, that I made $1. And at the end of the day, the money, the numbers are all that matters to the publisher. So we have to educate people. They're not realizing, they're like, well, I'm sharing your book with everyone, but that's not giving the publishers the numbers to see that. And so the industry is changing. I know authors who are like, well, they're not sending me on a tour, so I'm not going. And that's how your career goes to die. When they do send me on a tour, they send me on 10, I'm tacking on 10 more because I'm getting out to the people. No longer can you do if I write it, they will come. Mm-hmm. And so I go and I respect readers wherever I go. I've seen authors will go somewhere and they'll have 3-4 people show up and they'll get mad and they won't go anymore. But for me, I go and me and those 3 people are gonna have a ball. And to show you how it pays off, I went to a book signing in Little Rock early on in my career, and it was just 3 people there. And the bookseller was so apologetic. But I gave those 3 people my undivided attention. We had a great time, and it turns out one of those 3 people was married to a buyer from Walmart. She went home, raved about the book signing, and that Tuesday he bought 17,000 copies of Let the Church Say Amen.
Yeah. Okay. All right. There was one more question. You said. Oh.
I'll come after him.
Okay. And then there also are. Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
So I was wondering, sometimes
Do you need a
in
mic?
modern day, we have that same thing happening that Hattie went through, where we have a lot of African Americans being judged for the roles that they're playing. Now, I heard people say about Denzel.
Mm-hmm.
But I can name 3 very powerful people easily. Oprah Winfrey was put down in a lot of ways, but she owns and runs her own studios. It has unbelievable amount of power, billionaire. Right? Denzel Washington, criticized, but Denzel Washington is now controlling and doing all kinds of theatrical. He's doing all of August Wilson's plays and turning them into movies. People said the same thing about Tyler Perry. Thank you. He bought an Air Force base, turned it into studios. Do you think that there are still those similarities of people criticizing, not realizing that you're building an empire by taking whatever job you can get?
Antoine Fuqua, who is a director, has one of the biggest, most powerful quotes to me. He said he had to do what they wanted him to do in order to get to a position where he could do what he wanted to do. And I think so often we lose sight of that, and we're just so quick to criticize. Hattie, when we look back at Hattie McDaniel, people are complaining about her, criticizing even the Academy Awards, which she was not invited to. Because there was a no black policy at the Coconut Grove where the award ceremony was. David O. Selznick, they fought to get her there, and they sat her in the very back of the room. She was all the way in the back. And when we look back on that, we immediately get mad. And we focus on that, and we're like, this is why I don't like it. Well, it was 1939. And while we were mad, Hattie McDaniel was saying, but I'm in the room. That's never happened before, and I'm in the room. No, we don't want to settle and say we're going to take whatever scraps we get, but sometimes we have to understand I'm in the room. And they open the door for her to be in the room so that she can continue moving up. Now, it's been a slow journey, but we are quick to focus on the fact that they didn't want her in the room, and that's where we direct all our anger at. So yeah, it is definitely, it's ongoing. It's still a judgment of people as a whole. When you look at the actors today being crucified for dressing as women, however you feel about that, it shouldn't be an indictment on the whole race. When you look at Robin Williams and you look at those that did that, they're just white actors who were being comedic. But for some reason in the black community, any black person does it, we're like, okay, they're failing the black community. And that's not fair to those actors.
I think we failed the black community.
Absolutely.
ourselves, because we're so judgmental in all of the things that are going on. And we are the biggest problem for our people. I think that many, many times, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, so many people are just spinning in their graves because we continue to conform and want to be like something that we shouldn't want to be. There were times when we could do our own thing. We had nothing in the schools, but we were educated and our kids were educated.
One of the articles, there was a gossip columnist called Hedda Hopper who was in part of this book, and she wrote a big article that was picked up and run all over the country that said Hattie McDaniel's problem is her own people. And that was it. When I was working on this, I lived life, and I didn't realize my children had no idea who Hattie was. And, they were asking me what I'm working on, and we'd gone to LA. They were with me when I went to the house, and my son is looking at me like I'm crazy. Like, why is mama outside this woman's house so long? And so for the longest, he kept calling her Hattie LaBelle. He would say, Mama, when Hattie LaBelle book take off, I'm like, her name is Hattie McDaniel. And I explained to him what she did. And He's like, well, why have I never heard of her? And I'm like, because I'm a horrible mother, son. And it really is. It is up to us to tell our stories.
Every day.
And you also mentioned you're getting a lot of new readers because I'm not going to lie, historical fiction is hot right now.
Yeah.
I mean, hot.
I am in an online group, a Gone with the Wind Facebook page. So I joined it last year to just kind of get insight into everything. And they have about 45,000 members. And I posted about 3 weeks ago, right when the book came out, I posted a picture of Hattie and I wrote how I didn't initially like Hattie. And I explained why. And when I tell you the vitriol I got immediately, there was one man just when he was like, this is so stupid. Everybody likes Hattie. Why wouldn't you like her? She's this. And then I said, you are entitled to your opinion, but let me explain to you how a young girl of color, a young black girl felt seeing that and not seeing anything else. And when I was done, his response was, wow, I had never even thought of it that way. And so a lot of them, because I didn't meet them with aggression, they're not around us. They don't know anything. And so he was able to come and say, okay, I'm looking at this from your perspective. And then they started ordering the book just because I was able to give a different side to them. Then I was somewhere where the audience was primarily white. I was speaking, and this old woman, she had to be almost 100 years old. And she came up and she said the book gave her permission to love Hattie again, love Mammy again. And I asked her, what did she mean? She said, well, in 2020, everybody, you know, all you guys went crazy. So I was like, I shouldn't like Hattie anymore. I shouldn't like Mammy. She's being canceled. And you gave me permission because I'm able to see another side. And so I love being able to open those doors and give insight because they don't know as well. All they know is Mammy. So I'm happy to be able to show a different side.
Do you know if there was a relationship with the author of Gone with the Wind? Because again, most people don't know that at the end of it all, she gave all of her money to a HBCU.
Yes, she did, Margaret.
Yeah.
Margaret Mitchell. Yes, Margaret had a contentious relationship with the producers of Gone with the Wind. She did not want Hattie for the role. She didn't want them changing. And in her book, she uses the N-word. Hattie, people don't know this, Hattie decided when she got the script, she said, we're not using that. And because Hattie had a seat at the table, she was able to keep the N-word out of Gone with the Wind. And so Margaret didn't like that. Margaret wasn't on set because she was mad in general, but she did have a consultant on set. One of her friends who was a reporter stayed on set the whole time. And her issues was more with David O. Selznick. And he offered all kind of money for a sequel and she refused to do anything else. But she felt like I'm telling the story of the Old South and I don't want all these people changing my book.
But it was fascinating. She gave all the money to it.
It was.
There's some guilt there.
Yeah. Which HBCU she gave the money to?
I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I can't remember the one, but she did.
Yeah, I know Hattie gave a lot of her stuff to Howard.
But Hattie had, when Hattie died, she had about $10,000. Her worth was about $10,000. She owed the IRS $10,500.
I know her Oscar went and then it disappeared and then they got it back they gave her a proper one a few years
Her
ago.
Oscar disappeared. Howard will not admit to this, but the rumor was that in the late 70s with protests, the students threw it in the Potomac River because they hated the roles that she was playing. And so it took all of this time, but in October of 2023, the Academy finally replaced her award, and they gave it to Howard University.
Now, it looks like the actual Oscar, not the, off to the side and what the Oscar looks like now. Because I know the Oscars for the best supporting roles were different from the ones who got in those days, the best actor or best actress.
Right, best supporting actresses used to get a plaque, not an actual Oscar.
Wow. I wanted to know how old were you when you had that discussion with your grandmother about not liking him?
Yeah, I was about 11. And I was like, why is she acting like that? And then she a maid, and my grandmother said, I'm trying to watch this movie before I go clean Miss Margaret's house. What are you talking about? And I didn't look at my grandmother with disdain, so I don't know why I was looking at Hattie with disdain. My grandmother was a maid, my great-grandmother was a maid, but for some reason, seeing this woman on television, that was my initial reaction. So I really did start shifting my thinking then, especially when she was like, what else should she play? Now, of course, my grandmother also will watch General Hospital religiously, but I just didn't understand why you were watching this old movie with this black woman acting like this. So I've been always an outside the box promoter. This doesn't work as much anymore, but I'm gonna tell you when I started, what I would do is I was self-published initially, my very first book, and I would call a bookstore. I was in Oklahoma City at the time. I would call a bookstore here in Charleston and I'd say, hi, do you carry My Brother's Keeper by ReShonda Tate Billingsley? That was the name I wrote under. They say, nope, we don't have it, never heard of it. I called back about 4 hours later. Hi, do you carry this book called My Brother's Keeper? Nope, we don't have it, never heard of it. No joke, right before closing, I would be like, do you have a book called My Brother's Keeper? And they would say, no, we don't have it, but we need to get it because everybody's calling about this book. Now, I knew I had a good book, but I just had to figure out how to get it in the hands. And that's what I did. So when the booksellers were like, and booksellers hand sell books. So they would order a couple of copies and people would come in and they'd say, well, you might want to get this one because we get a lot of calls about this book. But I knew once they read it, they would like it. So it's always about outside the box thinking to try and promote. Social media also plays a big part too. Social media will have you thinking you're about to win an Oscar and you sold 10 books. So be very, very careful with social media. An indie author who wants to go traditional, you got to get people talking about the book. And so you can do that through book clubs because I don't suggest waiting around on a publisher because my editor has a stack of manuscripts from the floor to the ceiling. And people are sitting at home waiting on her to get to it. She is overworked and underpaid. She will never get to it. And so I suggest self-publishing while you have a manuscript that you pitch and you allow an agent or so to pitch it. But self-publish and then just spread the word, get people talking about your book. Because that's really going to be the easiest way because it's so many people. The best thing about Amazon publishing and all these places is that anybody can publish. The worst thing is that anybody can publish.
Yes. All right. So thank you, everybody, for attending this wonderful event.
Thank you. And I'd like to get a picture so that I can send to my publisher, if that's okay.
All right. So let me do this quick wrap up.
Okay.
Copies of The Queen of Sugar Hill can be purchased in the back from Turning Page Bookshop, who is our partner for today's event. ReShonda will be signing copies of the books and greeting the audience individually. Thank you, ReShonda. Thank you to your sister Tanisha. Thank you, Yolanda. Hopefully she'll be able to see this. Belinda Miller from Turning Page Bookshop, our CCPL Communications Department, Alexis Simmons, Roxy Underwood, and Natasha Brazillo. Julian Gooden, who's the man behind the camera. Gerald Moore, who is over there. Wave Gerald. He brought us those lovely pictures today. Fawn Yeager, Amanda Williams, and the staff here at Keith Summey, and my staff at DART, who is back there. Please visit DART. We are now open. We've been open for about a month, so please come out and visit. Thank you so much for attending, and y'all have a great evening, and bye.